Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake lie or imagination. Thank you so much for liking all our videos on the Ramayana research and also Mahabharata research and also making my book bestseller in the Americas. So thank you very much for all of you. I have a very special guest, a very good friend. So let us welcome Sri Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Thank you, and may the benediction of the Blessed Virgin Mary be upon all of you.
Abhijit, so we have been tracking the Ukraine Russia or NATO Russia war for a very long time now. Almost we have spoken on it on 6 or 7 shows already. So now we are getting a new reports by many independent American journalists or outside the Colonel McGregor and many other journals who are Jeffrey Sachs, who are making more sense on the national scene of America. Even the many of the politicians from the right side, right wing side, are also supporting such views of making peace for the sake of economy. Now, what is your view that how is this war going, and where is this war, and any end in sight of this war right now in the near future?
Look, as far as I'm concerned, this war is going to go on for at least 2 to 4 years. Uh, I don't see any end to sight. I've seen the terms that have been proposed for, Zelensky laid out his terms. Sure, those are maximalist demands, fine. But, even at the minimalist demand, it'll be too much for the Russians. They will not accept anything short of a complete, political castration of the Ukrainian presidential office. They will not accept a Western Ukraine that still has close ties with Europe and things like that, etc., etc. This is only going to end one way, and that is with the capitulation of Ukraine or the defeat of Russia. I don't see it ending any other way. Uh, of course, surprises might happen. Nothing's ever 100%. But as of now, this is how I see it ending.
Thanks for a real clear, absolutely clear words on this. So, guys, you heard it now. So, one of the things which really surprises me is that most of the weaponry being supplied to Ukraine, now American inspectors are on the ground in Ukraine trying to find out where those weapons are going. So, do you think that somewhere the American forces, our forces, have seen that something misuse is happening of those weapons? Because otherwise they won't be there on the ground. Or it is another ploy for putting a specialized, like same thing happened in Vietnam also. The first time the American troops went there were as inspectors.
It I'm not seeing, like, diversion always happens in every theater of war, but I'm not seeing any particular misuse of weapons other than the Ukrainians are using it to target civilians, which they've always done. I mean, for the last 8 years since 2014, that's what they were doing. And the American explanation always is, well, it's the explanation of every third world country. We don't have precision weapons, so we do what we can. It's very curious how double standards are, of course, applied to the Syrian army, which, being a third world army, does third world things, and condemning that as human rights violation, but applauding when Ukraine does the same thing under the same circumstance, of what is essentially a sort of a secessionist movement going after them the way any third world country would, applauding it as a freedom struggle. But this is, we're used to these kind of double standards, and we don't, I mean, I'm sure the American public takes all these pronouncements very seriously. I don't think anybody else does.
I mean, in this war, I have seen one thing I have seen that people are trusting the YouTube news sources more than the mainstream news sources. And people are following them more closely. There are reports which are going on daily, and those
Mhm.
channels have become very, very famous now. And I see those reports regularly and check them out because mainstream media is completely silent. And the only thing they're talking about is elections, which will come to know very shortly. And by the way, those of you who are voting today, please go out and vote. And from our side, we are completely independent of any choice, so you have to decide on your own. So other than that, other than the mainstream media, I mean, there's no news on the mainstream media. YouTube are the main sources for us also. Now, what is the view of, because there are a lot of talks happen between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, and in the staff, foreign ministers also talk. So, what do you think that India gets the information from the Russians?
Sorry, I didn't understand. As
So,
in,
what is the information which India gets, which is different than the rest of
we,
the world?
we don't get any information that's different from the rest of the world. Um, we have very limited sources of intelligence gathering. We have very limited sources. We don't even care about what realistically happens in Ukraine. So I bet you no Indian government organization actually spends any money to figure out what's happening in Ukraine. Because as far as we're concerned, it could be happening in Timbuktu.
So, one of the things which recently came up was, in the media reports and other places, is that the US is willing to transfer all technology for F414 engines to India for their MK2, Tejas MK2 or AMCA program. Now, the Indian planes which are India is making now, some of them media, these are all media reports, but this I'm talking about from the GE perspective. GE's took out the report, they're willing to do technology transfer to India, willing. So do you think that India can go in for that to make their own fighters?
Look, that technology transfer isn't on the table. Like that technology was never on the table. It requires a completely different level of trust between India and America that is not on the table.
We have covered that twice in the previous, but it has again come up here. Now, the when we talk about the elections in the USA, and we all know that the main plank of election is inflation and price rise, and those kind of things are the main plank which the people are voting for. But we also see from the Democrat side, other issues are being brought up, which are diversionary, like equity and other things. So do you think that those issues are, I know you support Republican viewpoint, but what are those? Are those points raised by the Democrats internationally, in India as well? They say the same points everywhere. They are talking about the war in Ukraine also as an equitable war to create human rights and other things. So, do you think that that logic works in, like, how does India view such elections, in the American elections as?
I think election time is one of those times where India feels first world and America feels third world. The kind of America election run, the kind of elections that America runs, they'd be kicked out of the Supreme Court in no time flat. It would be considered, all American elections would be considered shambolic jokes. Be it from the counting process to voter counting integrity to sort of process integrity, whatever, it really won't pass muster in India. So America may be way ahead of us in technology, but we're way ahead of America in terms of election integrity and voter list integrity, etc., etc. We err on the side of caution. We might actually deny some people the vote, but we ensure that they are actually citizens and things like that, and they're eligible to vote, and they're actually residents of where they claim to be residents of. On the other hand, we don't do things like, removing felons. I mean, even felons and prisoners get to vote. Uh, so all up, I think there's just this amusement in India about American elections that we've literally never seen a first world country have such third world systems, and it gives us that, that sadomasochistic tinge of superiority, which is fun at times.
In India, elections are going on, and one of the questions which I told you before also has come up, that why there are so many elections on a large scale in India, because in US also there are
Because
elections.
we don't have a coordination law. So in America, it's every 2 years rotation, etc., etc. In India, you don't. And what happened was, initially when it started off, the state and central elections all started off at the same time. The problem was that the first few governments, because there was no law on dismissal of state governments, the center went on dismissing any inimical state governments as and when it felt like. And so the entire election schedule got screwed over. That's basically what happened, which is why you have an absent a law, and nobody actually wants to pass that law because everybody who's in power wants their entire 5 years in power, and they're not willing to abide a law. And it's not good for the government also, by the way, right? Because they use these different elections as a gauge to measure how the national election is going. So it suits them to have elections in different states every 6 months or so.
True. I think that serves as a like a they want to know the feedback live feedback more than anyone else. So one of the recently the Indian space one of the Indian rockets put 36 satellites in the orbit, geostationary orbit, and which is made up of huge news all over the world, especially in the US, because the price of those launch was 60% less than what SpaceX or NASA would charge. And this is a great achievement for India as well, and also for the commercial space launch industry in the world. Now, what do you think the future has? Because some of the things which came up was that one of the things was that India is going to take over. Now the reports are started to coming in from the different sources, is especially in the campuses. India is going to take over the world in American campuses, and India is the next superpower after China. All those kind of things. So, what is your view? You know,
Just because China makes cheap knockoffs of American products doesn't mean it's going to take over the world. So India does a lot of cheap knockoffs. It's very good. It's admirable in the sense that you're democratizing space and bringing it at a price point, which China also did. I mean, it was a good thing that, tube lights and bulbs and toilet paper, etc., etc., became much cheaper and got outsourced to China. In this case, it's much, much more high tech. It's rocket technology. And it's admirable that we're doing it. But to say we're going to take over the world is a bit rich. What we can do is that we can democratize space. So think of it this way. Before, you only had newspapers and magazines with tight editorial control. Today, thanks to Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, that kind of uh, uh, that space, be it for news, be it for glamour, be it for social messaging, whatever, has gotten democratized. Now, does it mean Twitter has completely taken over the world? No. It is still newspapers setting the narrative. It is still newspapers that break the story and move the story. It is not Twitter that moves the story. Sure, Twitter amplifies a story, but it doesn't move a story. One second, there's clearly some not very nice dog being walked outside in the park. Um, so it's much the same phenomenon. We can act as an amplifier, a democratizer, etc. But I still think it is the technologically advanced countries that will continue to lead this race, and I don't see anywhere where we can leapfrog uh, America or uh, uh, even China, for that matter, because China puts a lot more effort in. And remember, it's not subject to as many, wasn't subject to as many tech transfer restrictions as India was for a very long time.
no, yes, absolutely. China has
And
far less restrictions than
it
anyone
spends
else.
a heck of a lot more on research.
No, see, the thing is, one of the things is like there is a lot of self-deprecation or in the Eastern world or non-Western world because they feel that they are a little bit lower or that mindset is there. So the competition is never equal because there is somewhere the mindset is little lower. Even though the Asia has progressed far more than Latin America, Latin America has still remained as a slave. So the Asia has really come up like in anything like India, China, Japan, and other places. If you compare the rest of the world, and if you calculate the economic production of Asia as compared to Europe or even G7, now
Mm,
G7 is much smaller than Asia in terms of economic output today.
mm.
So now that gives rise to a question that like we call it the West. So why can't there be the East? What is this? What stops us from getting to the East?
Because our history is different, we've always sort of had lots of paramount powers, as opposed to Europe that came to this recognition at the end of World War II that they had exhausted themselves, and in order to stop wars internally, they needed to accept an external hegemon. Now, true, America is not a sort of colonial master or whatever, but it is a hegemon in that sense. And so, because they externalized all their security to America, America became the hegemon, and they all accepted second rate status. In Asia, uh, first, we haven't had those kinds of wars, except, say, between Japan and China. But we've also never accepted, no country ever accepts it's going to be a second rate power. Even Vietnam will never accept it's a second rate power compared to China. They go hammer, and you have to admire Vietnam. They defeated the French, they defeated the Americans, they defeated the Chinese. And, we had a Vietnamese general come to Delhi and say, you don't need to be big to take on a giant. You just need to have a big heart to take on a giant. So, when you have countries like that have a story, small countries that have a story of amazing resistance, of amazing national identity and character, and no real united vision of an Asia as such. Because you look technically at Asia, it's divided into, three cultural groupings: the Buddhist East, the Hindu Center, and I would actually say five cultural groupings: the Buddhist East, the Hindu South Center, the Muslim East, the Christian North, and a very unique Turkic Muslim identity in the center. Right. Now, why would all of them look at themselves as, Europe used to think of itself as Europa in that sense? Greeks were considered equal to Romans, but Egyptians were not. So, or Greece, for example, would consider Romans to be equal, but they didn't consider the Egyptians to be equal in that sense, or the Levantines to be equal in that sense, even though they accepted the Levantine god. So there's lots of issues with identity, with things about paramountcy, etc., where Asia will never become like Europe. ASEAN was the first step, but even there, it's kind of gone down the whole of a bureaucratic, too much bureaucracy. And remember, there were clashes between Thailand and Laos, or Thailand and Cambodia, very recently, about 7, 8, 9 years back. So no, not happening.
I mean, don't you think the Western intelligence agencies and interventions and military doesn't want the East to be united? There is
No,
always created one issue
they may
to
not
fight with
want it
others.
united, but this whole thing about, I never buy this Western bogeyman nonsense. I think it's completely overstated. Ultimately, if you're stupid, you have to accept that you are stupid. You can't keep blaming it on somebody else. This Western bogeyman, Western intelligence bogeyman, is the geopolitical equivalent of wokeism. Wokeism is that you can't accept that you're a dumb, stupid, third rate shit who's never going to go anywhere in your life. And it's entirely because you're a moron, and nobody else is to blame for it. And, blaming the CIA for this conspiracy, that conspiracy. What the hell were you doing when the CIA was active? So, this is literally the equivalent of a woke person blaming society for all their faults instead of accepting faults within.
No, that is partly true, but not fully true, because sometimes what happens is like when you have economic, uh, threat of economic sanctions, the coercion. I know how it works on leverages, and
No, but who's coercing you against an Asian Union?
I mean, the thing is, like, there are many factors there. Like, for example, when there is a democracy, if somebody is funding Rahul Gandhi, somebody may, for example, I don't know, but if somebody is funding Rahul Gandhi and he's jumping all over the place with the Bharat Jodo Yatra, now there
But
is,
he has no electoral salience. He has 52 seats. It's probably going down to 30 seats next time. So again, what's stopping you?
see, the thing is,
Ultimately, if you're not doing something, it's entirely because of you. This externalization of problems and blaming other people for your own problems, it never works.
See, the India is a different case altogether. India, I'm not comparing with the rest of the other Asian countries, especially smaller ones like Cambodia,
Vietnam has
Laos,
managed to, Vietnam keeps out CIA influence. Singapore keeps out CIA influence very, very well.
Thailand.
Laos hasn't managed Chinese influence all that well, but Cambodia has. Thailand manages to play perfectly. Thailand and Burma are masters at playing off the Chinese against the Americans. Right. So overall, I'd say if a country is weak, it's its own fault, and everybody's going to try. India doesn't try. That's a different matter. We're lazy buggers, right? We're third rate and lazy at everything we do. That's a different matter. But just because we're third rate and lazy, we shouldn't assume that everybody else. See, again, this is the wokeism that comes out. India is a dunce when it comes to foreign policy, so we assume everybody else is a dunce.
See, now, like if you look at the Asia Pacific now, the American B-52 bombers are in Australia to supposedly ward off China.
Mm,
And one of the things which really strikes me that why Australia is becoming the new base, like the in the World War II, if you know history very well. So World War II, again, Australia was one of the major bases. Then Guam became a base, and which is today still an American base now. And all these countries they worked to circle Japan during that time. Now Japan is a base for Americans. The American forces are situated there. So do you think that the whole thing about I see in the American media a lot where World War III is coming and the American retired generals come on the TV shows and talk about it and makes it more credible because these people they I supposedly they know what they're talking about.
The first guy to write about World War III as a book was this jackass called General Sir John Hackett. And he wrote this book, World War III, complete nonsense book. Uh, it was practically a masturbatory fantasy of NATO. And this was the same guy that led the failed Arnhem landings of the Allies. Imagine amongst all the victorious Allied commanders, this guy was the dunce who failed at the one job he had. And his book became a great success. So, when you can, you do. When you can't, you go write a book or commentate on TV. I commentate on TV because clearly I can't. A lot of these TV commentator types are exactly that. So I don't take it very seriously. Of course, can World War III break out? Sure. I mean, unforeseen circumstances. Is this going to lead to World War III? No, because I think the systems in place to prevent a nuclear escalation are very strong.
No, the last topic which has come in, the Elon Musk. Now, Elon Musk, I personally like him because he stands for he says what he does and he has some good background behind it.
Mhm.
Now, when it comes to Twitter, now his official handle in the Twitter says that he's a chief complaint twat. His title is put as twat. Now,
Mm,
most of the people who are they have achieved a lot in their life. They can choose what the title they want. But he's being attacked by both left and right everywhere, whether in the US or India and everywhere else. The blue tick has become the fighting point with the American politicians talking about that the blue tick needs to be free, like entitlement. All right.
mm.
So, what is your view on the whole controversy around Elon Musk's takeover and and the way he's transforming Twitter? So one of the TV shows, I'll just add one more thing. One of the TV shows in USA and India talked the same thing that he's firing employees,
Mm.
and which he has to do obviously because the revenues are going down. So, what is your view on this takeover, and how will it affect elections globally?
I think it's already affected the midterms in that because he shut down all the offices, they couldn't put out all the shit that they wanted to.
Exactly.
Uh, yeah. And
And he's the
he's
first
come out
major
after,
social media platform to say he's going for Republicans. That's what he said.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think I think Elon is very fair in as much as Jack Dorsey was fair or Jeff Zuckerberg was fair and neutral and MSNBC is fair and neutral. And I'm just glad the Democrats are getting the taste of their own fair, balanced, and neutral medicine.
You'll be shocked that yesterday on the Facebook also the same rumor started circling around that Facebook is about to be taken over by Meta or somebody else. Meta is going to be taken over, and the share prices obviously dropped, and Facebook has fired more than 2-3 thousand employees. But one thing is there, content moderation in Facebook is off nowadays. So guys, if you want to write something, do it right now because it's off, and people are not monitoring it. So do you think it will have ripple effect on the whole world, that the way Elon Musk has changed Twitter maybe?
It will, because remember, I know a lot of Democrats as well who are sick and tired of content moderation and their platforms getting hijacked by the extreme left and gender ideology and all that shit. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see an exodus towards Twitter. So Whoopi Goldberg apparently deactivated her account, and that liar who accused Johnny Depp of whatever, she lost the case. Remember the liar, his ex-wife, what's her name?
I forgot the name, but I don't remember. Yes, I
Yeah,
know
you
the
know
whole
the
thing.
case. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And she also deactivated her account. But apparently, thousands of new people have been joining Twitter every day,
Yeah.
and engagement numbers are up. Now, when you create a model like that and you monetize that model directly on the basis of the public as opposed to advertisement, I think it makes a lot more sense because content is driven by payment. It will always be better if you pay for content rather than advertising paying for content, because advertisers will not want to be associated with certain material. For example, Lockheed Martin won't want their advertisement popping up under a news item about human rights violations in Yemen because an American because a Saudi Lockheed Martin plane dropped a bomb somewhere. Okay, but if you put their thing under I don't know, democratic freedoms, they'll be very happy. So they will push the agenda towards all this sanitized news, as opposed to you paying $8, which I absolutely do intend to pay because I believe in Elon Musk's business model. I'm not doing this ideologically, I'm doing this purely pragmatically because I don't believe. So for example, Wikipedia keeps asking you for money, and we all know they don't need that money. They're raising it from private funds and shit like that all over the place, which is completely shady. A News Laundry, for example, one of the shittiest media portals you'll ever come across, will keep asking you for money, whereas it's a fraction of what they actually need. It, in fact, does not cover any of what they need. And most of their money comes from shady shits like Omidyar and people like that, right? I would any day prefer a direct funder model. In fact, I would not have trusted. I'm glad that advertisers pulled out of Twitter. That's a very good thing.
I think there'll be less like
And you
motivated.
know why? Because I actually pay my 299 odd rupees a month or whatever it is to YouTube for YouTube Premium so that I don't have to endure advertisements.
True.
So I don't get to see advertisements. I don't want to see advertisements. Okay, so in all of these things, I actually pay money for the premium version of all the apps that I have installed in my phone so that I do not have to watch shit. Because I want to determine my content. I don't want shits telling me what to determine.
See, the basic problem which I had with the blue tick was, how can a private individual decide whether I should have a blue tick or not? If I have my driver's license, I have a passport, I'm a verified citizen, I'm a legal citizen, why should I give that power to a private organization to declare? Like I've owned, my background in IT, so I've owned software companies. I know how the products are built, and what is the purpose of the blue tick is to create a connected audience or a customer which is feels proud of his blue tick. So the whole idea of blue tick was communistic according to my mind, because I don't want to depend on anybody else to give me a
So
certificate.
again, that's what Elon is doing. He's democratizing the blue tick. If
Exactly.
you've got ID, what does he want? He wants verifiable people.
That's right.
He doesn't want the blue tick to be a status symbol.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't a platform where because MSNB thinks that your shit smells of roses, everybody's forced to think your shit smells of roses. Everybody has a right to come up to your shit, sniff it, and determine if it smells like shit or smells of roses.
Yes.
Right? And so blue tick needs to be a tick of veracity, not a label or badge of superior intellect or whatever crap. Because
Exactly.
superior intellect or relevance or whatever is something that you determine for yourself.
And credibility also. Like, how can blue tick build your credibility? And a lot of people get fooled by it. A lot of so many people should not have blue tick are having blue tick right now, and the people think that.
Absolutely. So what do we do about it? It's like, for example, I don't believe that your belief systems are entirely accurate. I believe that Christ is my savior and he's taking me to he is my salvation. Whereas you have your own heathen belief
Jai Shri
systems.
Ram, Jai Shri Ram,
Now, you to yours and me to mine.
Jai
Who are
Shri
you to
Krishna.
say that my belief systems are good or bad, or me to say that your belief systems are good or bad? And who's to give us a blue tick for what the ultimate truth is?
So,
Of
so
course, I welcome your conversion to Christianity and the fact that you've accepted Christ as your savior as well. But,
Jai Shri Ram. Okay.
yes.
All right. So, very good point, Abhijit here, because we know that the Elon Musk has democratized Twitter, and we love it. Like, you love it, I like it. We'll pay it whenever it starts. We'll pay it to get a
But
blue
just
tick.
so you know, I've taken Twitter to court.
Yes, I know, for some other reason before Elon Musk took over.
Yeah, before Elon Musk took over. But unfortunately, Elon Musk is going to have to pay the bills. I don't care. I think he has enough money.
Anyway, most of the staff who did that to you is already fired now. Majority of it, 80% is
It
gone.
doesn't matter. See, the issue is that it's the rot of that staff culture that needs to go. Giving
True.
out blue ticks to people who they like and not giving blue ticks to people they don't like.
And very few people know that Vijay Gadde and Parag Agrawal's exit was celebrated actually. That those two guys were celebrated that when they were kicked out of the company.
I don't know if that was celebrated in Twitter, but I sure as hell celebrated it,
I celebrated it.
especially with Vijaya Gadhi. Let's call her what she is, Vijaya Gadhi. Uh,
Absolutely.
Gadhi, for those of you who don't know, means donkey. So her name is
Female
actually
dog.
Vijaya Donkey, which is quite accurate. So Vijaya Gadhi going was the best thing that happened to Twitter. I've never come across a creature so dumb and so inarticulate and so ideologically toxic. Being in a position of power like that in a company that is meant to be accountable to its shareholders and make a profit. I've seen a lot of dumb people be in similarly ideologically toxic little shitheads in positions that do not require accountability, especially not private sector accountability, which is way higher than public sector accountability. But I think as donkeys go, this one was the queen donkey of the lot, hence the name Gadhe.
So by the way, just to clarify for all the audience, that in the in the Indian context, donkey is considered a different type of animal, but in American context, doesn't make a difference because the political party, one of the major political parties, has a donkey symbol. So
Hmm.
donkey is not considered a bad symbol here. So
No,
anyway,
but donkey is not considered a bad symbol here either.
but it's
It's
affiliated with something else.
no, no. You look at the association of donkeys; it's still considered very hardworking.
Yeah,
It's just considered a very supine and submissive animal that can't take decisions by itself.
right, right.
It's 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 literally a beast of burden
Yeah. And the elephant is always considered a wise symbol all over the world,
across cultures.
across
Across
cultures,
cultures, the elephant
across
is considered a symbol of royalty, of
royalty,
power, of strength, whatever.
across the cultures. That's right. That's right. Even though Americas did not have elephants, maybe in few million years back might have had elephants, but still it is considered a symbol of power. One last question today: the 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 equity dialogue, that we need to have the equity of participation of the brown skins and the black skins, and purposely, fighting or creating a fake propaganda of white supremacism. I am totally against colonization. I've written books on that. and
I
I,
don't believe in this term colonization, by the way.
but the point is here is the left has created such like a narratives, equity narrative, the white supremacist narrative, which I don't believe in particularly. And I don't believe in the color of the skin either, because it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, when you cut a skin, the blood is red. So, so this narrative, do you think that the common people, the mainstream people whose voices are never heard. I'm mainstream, my voices are never heard, even though I'm connected to many people, but it doesn't go anywhere. Do you think that the change in the social media ownership, like Elon Musk has done, or other factors are going to reduce this nonsense which is going on?
Yes and no, and I'll tell you why. Because one side wants diversity of gender, color, etc., etc., but doesn't want a diversity of opinion. They want a lot of genders. They want 72 genders and 554 skin colors and God knows what, parroting the exact same thing. The other side is like, if we, sure, it has problems, but it's much more tolerant of different points of view. The issue is, if you are a business person, you have to clamor to the powers that be, because the powers that be have essentially executed an institutional capture. You can't perpetually be the person outside because they're always looking to take you down. So let's see how this goes. I'm cautiously optimistic.
I'm also optimistic because the midterms in the US can change. And today, even today, the US, in a way, leads the world narrative in many ways, defines the narrative and sells the narrative all over the world. India also. India also, I see many of the TV anchors parroting many things which they don't even understand what
Yes,
they're
but remember, the good thing is those TV anchors have very low numbers ratings. Nobody actually watches NDTV. The viewership is shit. All the viewers go to Times Now and Republic and India Today to some extent, and News 18 increasingly, because they don't want to hear the shit that they don't want to hear parroted Western shit.
But many of the TV, and I don't come on Indian TV, so I can say openly, many of the shows there, and I won't name any channel, they tend to be very leftist in orientation. Like,
The
for example,
humanities is leftist. The humanities is leftist. Remember, the whole basis of humanity is a lack of accountability. Humanities, you can keep postulating theories which can't be proven for 1,000 years. In science, you can't come up with theories like that. You see, the proof for it is almost immediate.
right?
You can't be a leftist and be in science. You can't be a rightist and be in humanities because you threaten everybody's apple cart by demanding accountability, which is why the humanities and tend to be so overwhelmingly leftist, because it's full of dunces and losers who are fantastic at manipulation. Remember, the humanities controls history. Throughout history, most leaders, 99% of world leaders, would be from the humanities. They won't be actually from anything scientific or tangible.
Mostly recent history. Like one of the TV shows was, I'll give just a topic, I'll say, and in US also, the leftist media, NBC was talking about it, the layoffs. Even those channels where these people are talking about will do layoff when there is a downturn in their revenues. It's a very
Mhm.
normal thing to do. If
So
there is no
everybody's going ape shit about Twitter layoffs. Why aren't they going ape shit about Facebook layoffs?
right, everybody is quiet,
Yeah.
totally quiet. It's hypocrisy because
It's like that entire Wire Meta story that happened in India.
yeah,
What happened with it was everybody was going ape shit at Wire, but the other companies that floated and amplified the same story, Washington Post and Rana Ayub, Alt News and News Laundry, they quietly shoved the Wire under the truck, withdrew their own stories without apologies or anything like that,
so,
and just keeping quiet, basking in the glory of being principled at having pushed their former colleagues under the truck.
I mean that the whole Wire story was a total disgrace on the
No,
media
but
community,
see, whatever the Wire story was, they came out and apologized for it.
right?
News Laundry, Alt News, and this Rana Ayub and Washington Post, they didn't even acknowledge that they amplified the previous Tech Fog story and never apologized for it. They just quietly removed it by stealth.
Yeah, because those people are worked on by the intelligence agencies of other
Yeah,
countries.
exactly.
Exactly. Pretty much. They're being used for peddling those lies and to show
Yeah.
India bad in
Washington
American viewpoint.
Post, Washington Post is the biggest prostitute organization around. It's a Chinese prostitute.
That's right. That's right. So
Okay, it is funded by Chinese money. News Laundry is funded by some American organization called the Omidyar Network. They are incidentally funded by Facebook, which is why they keep putting this big. You'll see their so-called media rumble. There is a big Facebook thing, and guess what? They came out to defend Facebook. Yay! How principled that you came out to defend your funder against your friend. Whereas the last time the victim wasn't your friend, and therefore you didn't do it. Their office is pretty close to GB Road, so it kind of makes sense. Alt news, of course, is like it's the democratization of GB Road all across the world. Whereas News Laundry's office is close to GB Road, Alt News is taking GB Road to the world.
Anyway, thank you so much, Abhijit, for coming on the show today, and thank you for all the students who have joined. It's a huge number, and they all really want you back regularly. So that's what they told me just now. And thank you. Do like, subscribe, and share the videos, and we'll be back shortly next week. Namaste.